She just disrespected you in front of your friends, or maybe she dismissed your opinion like it meant nothing, or perhaps she crossed a boundary you specifically talked about. And here's the moment that determines everything. What you do in the next 30 seconds will decide whether she ever respects you again. 95% of men fail this test immediately. They don't even know they're being tested. They react in ways that guarantee they'll never be taken seriously by her again. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to break down exactly what this test is, why she's doing it, and most importantly, the one response that separates the 5% of men who pass from the 95% who fail miserably. This is the difference between being respected and being walked over for the rest of your relationship. Let's get one thing straight from the start. Women test men, not because they're evil, not because they're playing games, but because they're biologically wired to determine whether you're actually who you present yourself to be. It's not a conscious conspiracy. It's deeper than that. It's instinct. And here's the brutal truth that most men never understand. These tests never stop. They don't end after the first date. They don't end after you sleep together. They don't end after marriage. As long as you're in a relationship with a woman, you will be tested. The only question is whether you pass or fail. Today, we're focusing on the most important test of all, the respect test. This is the test where she does something or says something that crosses a line, that challenges your boundaries, that questions your authority or your value. And 95% of men respond in ways that immediately disqualify them from ever being truly respected. I'm going to show you exactly what this test looks like, why it happens, what she's actually looking for, and the precise response that will make you part of that elite 5%. Let's break this down. First, we need to define exactly what we're talking about because most men don't even recognize when they're being tested. The respect test comes in many forms, but they all have one thing in common. She's pushing against your boundaries to see if they're real or just for show. Here's what it looks like in practice. She says something disrespectful about you in front of other people, maybe disguised as a joke. "Oh, he's useless around the house," she laughs while your friends are over. Or she deliberately does something you've asked her not to do. You told her you're uncomfortable with her staying in close contact with her ex, and she continues doing it anyway. Or she dismisses your thoughts and opinions. You share something important to you, and she rolls her eyes or changes the subject like what you said doesn't matter. These aren't accidents. These aren't her just having a bad day. These are deliberate tests, often subconscious, to measure your response. She's checking whether you have a backbone or whether you're just pretending to be a strong man while actually being easily pushed around. The test itself is simple. Will you enforce your boundaries, or will you let her cross them without consequence? Will you stand firm in your value, or will you shrink and apologize and backtrack? That's it. That's the entire test. But here's why 95% of men fail. They don't understand what she's actually testing for. They think she wants them to be agreeable, to be understanding, to let things slide. They're dead wrong. Now let's talk about why this test happens at all, because if you understand the why, the what becomes much clearer. Women are not testing you to be cruel. They're not doing it because they enjoy watching you squirm, at least not healthy women. They're testing you because they need to know something critical. Are you actually the man you presented yourself to be? Or was that just an act to win them over? Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. For thousands of years, a woman's survival and the survival of her children depended entirely on choosing the right man. A weak man meant danger. A man who couldn't protect her, who couldn't stand up to threats, who folded under pressure was a liability. So women developed an incredibly sophisticated radar for detecting strength versus the appearance of strength. In the modern world, physical survival isn't usually the issue, but the instinct remains. She needs to know, can you handle pressure? Will you stand your ground when challenged? Are you going to be the oak tree she can lean on, or are you going to bend and break the moment things get difficult? Here's the key insight. She's not testing to see if you'll fight her. She's testing to see if you'll stand firm. There's a massive difference. Fighting is reactive and emotional. Standing firm is calm and unmovable. One is weakness disguised as strength. The other is actual strength. When she crosses a boundary, when she disrespects you, when she pushes against you, she's asking a question without words. Are you really who I think you are, or did I make a mistake? Your response answers that question immediately and definitively, and most men give the wrong answer without even realizing what they've done. Let's talk about what 95% of men do the moment they're tested, because this is where everything falls apart. The most common response is immediate defensiveness. She says something disrespectful, and you immediately jump to defend yourself, to explain yourself, to justify your position. Well, actually, I do help around the house. Remember last week when I... And just like that, you failed. You're in her frame now. You're explaining yourself to someone who just disrespected you. Think about what that communicates. When you defend yourself, you're essentially saying, "You're right to question me. You have the authority to judge me. Please approve of me." That's not the energy of a high-value man. That's the energy of someone seeking validation from someone who just showed them disrespect. The second most common response is anger. She crosses a line and you blow up. You raise your voice, you get emotional, you try to put her in her place through aggression, and again, you failed. Because anger is not strength. Anger is what happens when someone who lacks control loses the little control they had. When you get angry, you're giving her evidence that she got to you, that she controls your emotional state, that she has power over you. And ironically, even though you're trying to establish dominance through your anger, you're actually demonstrating that you're easily manipulated. She pushed a button and you reacted exactly as expected. That's not passing a test. That's confirming her suspicion that you're not as solid as you pretend to be. The third most common response, and perhaps the most pathetic, is complete capitulation. She disrespects you and you just take it. You smile awkwardly. You try to laugh it off. You pretend it didn't bother you while internally you're seething. You become passive, hoping that if you just ignore it, things will get better. They won't. They'll get worse, because you just taught her that she can disrespect you without consequence. Here's what most men completely miss. When she tests you, she's not hoping you'll fail. She actually wants you to pass. She wants you to be the man she thought you were. She wants confirmation that she chose correctly. So what is she looking for? What does passing this test actually look like? She's looking for calm, unmovable strength. She's looking for a man who knows his worth so deeply that her disrespect doesn't shake him. She's looking for someone who will enforce boundaries without anger, without explanation, without apology. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like. She says something disrespectful in front of your friends. The man who fails gets defensive or angry or pretends it didn't happen. The man who passes does something completely different. He stops. He looks at her, not with anger, not with hurt, with a calm, almost curious expression. And he says nothing in that moment. He simply makes a mental note. The conversation continues. Life goes on. But later, when they're alone, he addresses it. Not emotionally, not accusingly, just factually. What you said earlier in front of everyone wasn't okay. That's not how we speak to each other. And then here's the critical part. He's prepared to walk away if that boundary isn't respected. That's what she's looking for. A man who doesn't need to prove himself in the moment. A man who isn't controlled by his emotions. A man who has such a deep sense of self-worth that her disrespect is simply noted and dealt with appropriately, not with emotional reactivity. She's looking for evidence that you can handle not just her, but life. Because if you can't handle a disrespectful comment without losing your composure, how are you going to handle real adversity? How are you going to lead? How are you going to be the person she can rely on when things actually get difficult? That's what the test is really measuring, and that's why so few men pass. Let's go deeper and understand the biological programming that makes this test inevitable. Because when you understand the science, you stop taking it personally. Women are hypergamous by nature. That's not an insult, it's biology. Hypergamy means they're attracted to men who are higher status than themselves, or at least perceived to be. This made perfect sense evolutionarily. A woman who paired with the strongest, most capable man had the best chance of survival for herself and her offspring. But here's the challenge with hypergamy. Her perception of your status is not fixed. It's constantly being evaluated and re-evaluated based on your behavior. You don't get to establish your value once and then coast on it forever. You have to consistently demonstrate it. The respect test is her biological mechanism for continuous status evaluation. She's checking whether you're still the high-status man she thought she was with, or whether you've revealed yourself to be lower value than she initially perceived. When you fail the test, when you get defensive or angry or passive, you're triggering her hypergamous alarm system. You're showing her that your status isn't as high as she thought. You're demonstrating that you can be easily shaken, easily manipulated, easily disrespected, and on a biological level that makes you less attractive to her. This isn't conscious. She's not sitting there thinking, I'm going to test his status. It's happening on an instinctual level. Her body and her subconscious are gathering data about whether you're really the strong man you presented yourself to be. The good news is that once you understand this, you can stop taking the test personally. She's not trying to hurt you. She's trying to confirm what she hopes is true, that you're actually strong enough to be with her. Here's something fascinating. High-value men often pass these tests without even recognizing them as tests. Why? Because their response isn't calculated or strategic. It's just who they are. Their boundaries are so solid, their self-respect is so non-negotiable, that disrespect simply bounces off them like water off a duck's back. Let me explain how this works. When you truly know your worth, when you're genuinely secure in who you are, someone else's disrespect becomes almost irrelevant. It's not that it doesn't register, it's that it doesn't shake you because your value isn't dependent on their validation. Think about how you'd react if a homeless person on the street insulted you. Would you get defensive? Would you get angry? Would you need to prove yourself to them? Of course not. You'd recognize that their opinion has no bearing on your reality. You might feel momentary annoyance, but you wouldn't be moved by it. High-value men have that same energy in relationships, but here's the critical difference. They still enforce boundaries. They don't let disrespect slide just because it doesn't shake them. They address it, but from a place of calm authority rather than emotional reactivity. When she tests a high-value man, here's what happens. He notices it. He doesn't react immediately. He processes what happened without emotion clouding his judgment. He determines whether this is a pattern or an isolated incident. If it's isolated, he addresses it calmly and moves on. If it's a pattern, he addresses it calmly and is prepared to walk away if nothing changes. Notice what's absent from this response. There's no defensiveness, no anger, no need to prove anything. There's just calm recognition and appropriate boundary enforcement. He's not trying to control her, he's not trying to punish her, he's simply communicating what he will and won't accept, and he's genuinely prepared to back that up with action. This is why high-value men pass without trying. The test is designed to measure something they already have: unshakable self-respect and the willingness to walk away from anyone who doesn't respect it. Let's get specific about what failure looks like so you can recognize these patterns in yourself and eliminate them immediately. And failure response number 1, the explainer. This is the guy who immediately launches into a detailed explanation of why what she said was wrong or why he's actually right. Actually, if you remember, I did take out the trash last Tuesday, and I also washed the dishes on Wednesday, and stop. Just stop. The moment you're explaining yourself to someone who just disrespected you, you've lost. You've entered her frame. You've accepted the premise that she has the authority to judge you and that you need to justify yourself to her. High-value men don't explain themselves to people who disrespect them. They don't need to. Their actions speak louder than their explanations ever could. When you're explaining, you're trying to convince her of your value, but value that needs to be explained isn't real value. Failure response number 2, the reactor. This is the guy who goes from 0 to 100 immediately. She says something disrespectful and he explodes. How dare you speak to me like that, after everything I do for you? He's loud, he's aggressive, he's completely out of control emotionally. And in that moment, he's proven exactly what she was testing for. He's not actually strong. He's fragile. He can be easily triggered. He's all bark and no bite. Real strength doesn't need volume. Real strength doesn't need aggression. Real strength is calm, controlled, and unmovable. When you react with anger, you're showing her that she has control over your emotional state. That's the opposite of strength. That's weakness wearing a loud mask. Failure response number 3, the doormat. This is perhaps the saddest response. This is the guy who pretends it didn't happen. She disrespects him, and he just absorbs it. He smiles nervously. He changes the subject. He hopes that if he ignores it, it will go away. Maybe he even laughs along with her joke at his expense, thinking that shows he's secure enough to take a joke. What he doesn't realize is that he's not showing security. He's showing that he has no boundaries at all. He's demonstrating that she can say anything, do anything, cross any line, and there will be no consequences. He's training her to disrespect him more, not less. This response is actually worse than anger, because at least anger shows that you noticed and cared. The doormat doesn't even value himself enough to acknowledge when he's been disrespected. Now let's talk about the response that puts you in that elite 5%. This is the response that makes her respect you, that makes her attraction to you deepen, that passes the test so definitively that she'll think twice before testing you again. Here it is. Calm acknowledgement followed by boundary enforcement without emotion. Let me break down exactly what this looks like in practice. She disrespects you, maybe in public, maybe in private. It doesn't matter. The first thing you do is nothing. You don't react, you don't defend, you don't attack. You simply observe and note what happened. You let the moment pass without giving it energy. Then, when you're alone with her, when emotions aren't running high, you address it. And here's exactly how you do it. You state what happened as a fact, not an accusation. When you said X in front of everyone, that crossed a line. Notice. No emotion, no blame. Just a factual statement. Then you set the boundary clearly. That's not how we speak to each other. I don't disrespect you and I won't accept being disrespected. Again, calm, firm, clear. And here's the most important part. You're genuinely prepared to enforce that boundary. This isn't a threat. This isn't a negotiation. This is you communicating your standards and being completely willing to walk away if those standards aren't met. The magic of this approach is that it communicates everything she was testing for. You're not reactive, so she knows you're in control of yourself. You're not defensive, so she knows you're secure in your value. You're not passive, so she knows you have real boundaries. And you're willing to walk away, so she knows you value yourself more than you value her validation. That last part is crucial. The willingness to walk away is what makes every other boundary real. Without it, your words are just words. With it, you've just demonstrated that you're a man of substance, a man who knows his worth, a man who cannot be disrespected without consequence. That's the response that passes the test. Let's bring this home because I want you to truly understand what's at stake here. 95% of men fail the respect test because they fundamentally misunderstand what's being tested. They think she wants them to be nice, agreeable, understanding. They think the path to a woman's heart is through accommodation and avoiding conflict. They're wrong. What she's actually testing for is strength. Not aggression, not dominance, but genuine, unshakable strength. The kind of strength that doesn't need to prove itself. The kind of strength that sets boundaries calmly and enforces them consistently. The kind of strength that values itself enough to walk away from disrespect. When you understand that, when you internalize that, everything changes. You stop getting defensive because you realize you don't need to defend your value to anyone. You stop getting angry because you understand that anger is the response of someone who's been shaken. You stop being passive because you recognize that boundaries without enforcement are just suggestions. You become part of that 5%. The men who are genuinely respected. The men who women test less because they've already proven what they needed to prove. The men who attract and keep high-quality women because they refuse to tolerate anything less. If this resonated with you, if you're ready to join that 5%, drop a comment right now. Boundaries matter. Subscribe to this channel because next week we're covering the 5 things women do when they realize they've lost a high-value man. These are the signs you need to recognize. Until then, remember, respect isn't given freely. It's earned through boundary enforcement. Be the man who earns it. I'll see you in the next one.